and some exciting opportunities as the year is going to unfold that really needs all of us to participate. So we'll just give a few more minutes. And Susan went and grabbed some annual reports, so there'll be some available at the back of the room if anyone needs an annual report. Okay, is that better? You're going to up the volume? Okay. Thank you. I try not to scream when I have a headset on. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So again, there's some annual reports at the front or back. Jocelyn? There you go.
Thank you very much.
I was expecting one of the pastors down. But let's also be respectful of time. So I'm Julie Walsh. I am your current Congregational Council President. I have had the humbling and incredible experience of being president for this past year and vice president before that. And I truly want to thank you for the opportunity to serve you, because I took this role with that always in the front of my mind, that God will guide my heart and my mind and my lips to do your work. And that's what I dedicated this last 2 years for you. So thank you. Honestly, it was a privilege to let me serve. So thank you. How about a quick prayer since we don't have the pastors? Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to start previewing the excitements that are going to come in the 24 year and to highlight all the amazing things that you did through us in 2023. Thank you for the gifted and talented people who are involved here today. Thank you for the opportunity and the faith that our congregation has in the executive team and in those from all the committees and all who are willing to step up and say yes. Thank you for this time, and that we may learn and discern and start digesting some of this information that we're going to present to you today. Lord, thank you just for us to be able to gather. In your name, amen. So again, today we are presenting the highlight of what will be next week. We have the annual meeting next week at 11:45 on the 11th, and we will go through many of the same slides. There'll be some additional depth of reports which are also contained in the annual meeting. For me, I just wanted to quickly highlight, because I don't want to absorb too much of time on my kind of things, but if you just stop and think about where we were a year ago and where we are sitting today, it's pretty incredible. So in this year, we celebrated the 25th ordinations for Pastor Katie and Pastor Blake. We celebrated the 50th ordination of Ken. We celebrated the 70th anniversary of this building. So thank you for giving me a really high year. I really appreciate that. We also, as you know, we've also retired our debt. So that is only through the gracious giving of all of you and dedication to that. So again, thanks. I know not all presidents get to have those kind of years, so I truly appreciate getting that one. But I also saw from the passing of this year, the growth and the depth of our community. And what we did is coming back together, and you saw the numbers shifting, and you saw the more faces, and you saw the crowds. And I don't know if for the service that I was at for Christmas, the number of people, we were all the way to the serving counter in the gathering space of rows of chairs. And it was amazing. For anyone who was there and any other service, the power of our presence, the power of those who can join us online is incredible. And truly, we can feel that we can do anything. And when you hear these reports, we kind of have. So I truly appreciate your time this morning, and I'm going to hand off to Derek.
Okay, can everyone hear me here? Good, all right. So I'm Derek Matzke, the treasurer. I've been the treasurer for a number of years now, so it's been really been great to work with everybody on the council. Julie, thank you for all your leadership this year, and it's good to be in front of everyone talking about our budget for 2024 and then also looking back on 2023 and how that went. So all the budget information certainly in your annual report in a lot more detail. I usually put together this slide, a couple other slides, just to summarize some of the high level items that are important for us to talk about. This is 2023, then we have a little bit of information on 2024, just to give you a recap, a chance to ask any questions and work through any questions now so that when we get to the annual meeting, it's just kind of a pretty easy conversation. So 2023, so the middle column was our budget. So we were budgeting for a deficit of $76,000. So if you remember this conversation a year ago, the church over the last 9-10 years has had a number of surplus years, almost always a surplus year, probably built up a surplus that was more than $150,000. So we've been very good stewards of our money for many years, and we're a nonprofit, right? As this organization, we intend to, all the money that comes in from all the members of the church, we want to invest that in the activities of our church, in our community. So we've been able to build up a nice surplus. So we did budget a larger deficit, right? In the way we have our church staff and the organizations we support. We've always budgeted a deficit since the years I've been involved and then come in with much better results than that. So for 2023, our actual results was a deficit of $33,000. There's another slide after this. I'll kind of get into some more of the details, but at a high level, the regular giving, which is probably the most important thing to talk about, was right in line with our budget and a nice increase compared to 2022. So the pledges that this congregation puts forth, which are very generous, continue to be fulfilled. Total offerings number, that includes the loose offerings. So over the last 3-4 years, kind of the pandemic years, the loose offerings really fell off with just less people in church or maybe less guests, or we're not maybe as vocal about passing around the basket and things like that. But actually the loose offerings has come back pretty nicely in 2023, especially in December. It was a very big number compared to, right on line with years in 2019 and 2018. So that's a really good sign to just kind of see the loose offerings and the other kind of, money that the church brings in there. So total revenue is $877,000, ahead of $869 our budget, and ahead of $854 last year. So that's to suggest we are growing congregation as far as the support that we're all willing to put forth into the general fund. Then when you look at the expenses, we budgeted for $945, but only spent $911,000, and we'll go over that on the next slide. There were some church staff positions that were open for most of the year, mostly filled now. So I think we should be hitting that salaries budget line moving forward, but we didn't have all those positions filled for a portion of the year. So that's one of the reasons why that expense line is lower. So maybe flip to the next slide, please. So this is the accountant in me kind of putting together a little bridge from this is what we budgeted, right? And then here's where we ended up. These are really the reasons that kind of contribute to that. So our regular giving and our offerings were about $14,000 higher than what we expected. So I'm just putting that in the positive column, like positive towards the results of our budget. So building usage income is down. So we don't have the MSCR group in here. We don't have a family at Wakefield. So we were getting some money from the MCF Foundation, Madison Community Foundation, that helps support the family that was there. So there's no family there, so there's no money coming in from that side of it either. $15,000 for Wakefield building repairs and maintenance. So if you remember, we did a lot of work over at Wakefield this year. We decided to take a good amount of that out of our operating budget. We also have the capital improvement fund, which is money, about $40,000 to $50,000 in there, which we contribute towards, and we keep that saved up for bigger repairs that might be needed on the building. We need a new boiler, we need a new air conditioning, whatever we might need. But we decided to just use some of that money out of our operating budget to take care of some of the repairs at Wakefield, since we've had some of those surpluses built up over the years. There was other money used for repairs at Wakefield that came from memorials and other places as well, but this is the amount that the operating budget of the church took on. And there were other maintenance issues that we needed to take care of in this building, right? We had a whole host of mechanical issues and things that were over and above our budget. So just we have an older building and there's always going to be expenses there. So $32,000, that's how much less we spent on salaries and wages than what we had budgeted. Those open church staff positions for a good portion of the early part of the year. So that's kind of a savings. I'm not saying that's positive that we don't have those church staff positions filled, but when you look at the budget, it's a savings. And then other committees come in under budget. So we ended up with a deficit of $33,000. So I was very happy with the way the year went. I think we should all be proud of how the results for 2023 went. Does anyone just have any questions just about 2023 and kind of how that all went, just from the general operating? Yep. Oh, he was asking about what's the reduced transfer to CIP Capital Improvement Fund. So that in our normal budget, we take about $20,000 and take it from all of our regular givings, move it to the Capital Improvement Fund, and we keep that money set aside for repairs that are going to be needed on the building. But we were already taking some out of our general fund to help on Wakefield, so we kind of reduced the amount we gave to that fund by $3,000 at the end of the year. And you'll see in the 2024 budget, we're going to budget to put less into that Capital Improvement Fund in 2024 because that fund is getting sizable. And we're contemplating a big project here on this church. So if anything comes up now on the building, we're likely going to defer it to hopefully a bigger renovation project as well.
Hey, Derek. Where does the P come from in CIP? Is that
project? Maybe I should have an F.
That's okay. I just that was what was
fund.
I was trying to figure out how I would remember it, and I couldn't.
So as an accountant, CIP is like a construction in process, which is probably something I use a lot, and I might have just wrote that. Yes, thank you. You can flip to the next slide, please. So Julie mentioned it, but we have paid off the mortgage on the building, which is a fantastic accomplishment. This just officially kind of saying it. We started with $200,000, and now we've paid it off. So all the generosity of the congregation to continue to contribute money towards the building has helped us pay that balance off. Okay. So when you look at the building fund in the 2023 year-end report, you will still see money in the building fund. That was the money that we had always money in there, and we were making our mortgage payments out of the building fund. There have been some people who have already generously given towards the ministry wing renovation project, or out ahead of that project. So we do have money already starting to come in, and it's being held in that building fund. We have to pay the consultants, the fundraising consultants are being paid out of there. So you will still see money in that building fund. That's where all the eventual gifts, hopefully, that come for the ministry wing will be tracked in there, and we'll be using that then to pay out some of the initial construction costs and things like that. So you will see a balance in there, and that's good because we are going to need money to handle things there. So 2023 stewardship campaign, really looking ahead though for 2024. This is the most important thing for our church. Like what is our commitment level for 2024 when it comes to our regular giving? So $770,000 worth of pledges for the general operating budget of the church for 2024. A very strong number, continues to increase. Obviously, the members of this congregation are very generous with their financial gifts. There's a lot more detail that goes behind that, but we have a number of new pledges, first-time pledges. Lots of people have increased their giving. A number of people are keeping it the same, and there's some people who have stopped their pledging or maybe moved on to a different congregation. So there's a mix there, but certainly the new pledges, people who are pledging to the congregation for the first time, and the increases are really leading that number to be 770,000. That's like maybe 4% higher. It was a big jump from 2022 to 2023 as well. So from 2022 to 2024, that's a very large increase. And so everyone, we should all be very proud of ourselves for the commitments that we're making, and helps us lead into the budget. You could flip the slide. So 2024 budget is here in the right-hand column, kind of the last year's budget and then last year's actual results. And then here's the budget on the right-hand side. So obviously budgeting an increase in regular giving. We're budgeting a little bit increase in other offerings. So 900,000 is the proposed budget for our general account revenue. This regular giving number is not going to match the pledges exactly because there's a number of people in the congregation who give very generously but never fill out a pledge form. There are people who join the congregation in the middle of the year and start giving money but just don't have official pledge forms. So there's always a little bit of a bridge, maybe $75,000 to $100,000 of additional giving, or people that just give over and above what their pledge numbers are. So that's why that's not exactly going to match. Should also note, well, can you flip to the next slide, please? Because I've got some more details. So this is just a little bit of background on the differences in the revenue income. So we're budgeting a 2% increase in regular giving, which we just talked about. So hunger offerings, a lot of people in the congregation give pretty generously to our hunger offerings during the course of the year. Historically, we've just sort of tracked that separately. The money comes in, we pay it out at the end of the year. It's a fine process, but we wanted to kind of formally just get it into our regular operating budget so we could always track it and see it there. So we just budgeted $12,000 in the other offerings and then another $12,000 in social ministry to pay out the hunger offerings. It's no effect on the bottom line of our budget, but it does make other offerings look like it goes up and it makes social ministry look like it goes up. But this is money that comes in and goes out. So if it's 13,000, if it's 14,000, if it's 10,000, it's just going to be the same number in, same number out. But you'll see it, offerings look higher, and that's one of the reasons for it. We're continuing to, budget for very, lower building usage income, especially if we move into a construction phase. Obviously, we can't really use this building very much for other outside organizations. In the future, certainly, that number may well go up if we have a much more usable space. And if you may or may not know, but we took out a CD during the course of the year. So we had over $200,000 just in cash in our checking account. So we decided to put $75,000 into a CD a few months back. We got 5% interest. So we're going to have an extra maybe $4,000 or so of interest income, which is also part of the operating budget of the church next year.
Derek, Nancy,
Yes.
Abraham.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for all you're doing.
Sure.
I'm just having a little trouble following because sometimes it's in here or it's differently in the way
Okay.
you're presenting.
Sure.
So, and that was the initial first sheet that you had.
Okay.
But now also, this is picky, I'm sorry.
Sure.
But the $12,000 in what's in the printed is $12,200. So I'm seeing little things like that. It's not a big
Sure.
deal, and I understand there's a lot to do,
Yeah.
but I'm just I'm just saying that I'm a bit confused. And I was with that
Okay. So we'll just take a note of that, and then we can update the report if we need to for the 12,000.
I would have,
200.
since it's different, I would have liked a piece of paper to look at,
Sure.
try to understand why it was different.
Okay. I'm mostly using this as a way to summarize the results of trying to give some perspective on the budget. Not all these numbers may be exact. I might rounding or giving percentages, but so that sometimes reading this is also hard to understand what's really happening behind the numbers. So I'm just trying to give that perspective. We haven't really printed out the slides. We could print out the slides as well if someone would like a copy of them going forward. So can you just go back to the actual sheet that has the full budget on it? So for expenses, here you'll see the social ministry budget's a little bit higher, and that includes the hunger offering number that's gone up. There actually are a couple organizations that we've decided to back off on our support for, just as we look at all the organizations over the course of the year and make sure we're balancing our budget needs. Here's that salaries and ministry support line is higher. We have talk about our church staff and the increasing wages there, so that I can talk about that on the next slide. Overall budgeting deficit of 62,000. So maybe go back to the slide that has the expenses detail on it. Yep, other direction. Other direction. The wording paragraph, like after the income slide. Go back. One more, no, one more the other direction. One more, right there.
Sorry.
Nope. So this is kind of giving the bullet points on the expenses side of our budget, just to help summarize the key items. So the 12,000 is now budgeted in social ministry. We've reduced our support for a few other organizations, or reduced the support in a few other organizations, smaller dollars. So buildings and ground. Yep, Jocelyn, go ahead.
I'm just curious why we're backing off on Lutheran social services.
Pastor Blake, or if Ben or someone wanted to speak to I know Ben might not be here, but if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. So the social ministry committee met and looked at the total giving. Pastor Katie, as you know, serves on the board of LSS, and in many, they're actually have a surplus in their operating and expenses, and they are doing really well with the contracts they're receiving and their finances. And so also they're cutting back some on their immigration and refugee settlement, which is part of why we increased the offering to LSS a few years ago. So I think those were some of the reasons. Ben Kempinen and the Social Ministry Committee could answer more directly, but if that gives you a overview or a summary.
And certainly just being conscious of our overall budget and the organizations we support, trying to look at that really closely. So buildings and grounds. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about Wakefield. So last year, right, we had more spend on Wakefield, and we helped with some of the, when I say we here, I'm talking the general operating budget of the church, right? Spend some additional money to help with the repairs. That's kind of moved to a spot where the general operating budget of our church is, not going to have much of a say or contribute too much to what any other repairs might be needed over there. But we have budgeted, the operating budget of the church has budgeted $6,000 to cover utilities at Wakefield. So whatever usage may come from the Wakefield property, we as a church need to make sure we can have the power and the lights and the basics on, right? Since we own that property and need to maintain it. So there's $6,000 budget in there for utilities. If there's other repairs that are needed at Wakefield, if there's whatever other work might need to be done, that's going to have to be taken up separately by the church through memorial funds or other conversations about how to pay for that. There is an endowment grant. As we get the endowment grants and we talk about those for the immigration action team, if all those were approved, that money could be used to cover any utilities that would be needed if there was a family that was in that house as part of the immigration action team. So that would be covered by the endowment and then not be paid by our general fund if we get there. So that would be some savings. And then we budgeted $15,000 less for that capital improvement. Capital improvement fund. So that's what we were talking about before. So for the salaries and ministry support, so we budgeted a 4% increase in salary for our church staff. Had a lot of conversation about that. Just our church staff is fantastic, does a great job. We want to reward them and make sure they are, absolutely, make sure that they continue to be an important part of the things we do at this church, and try to look at the factors in the overall economy and in Madison and came to that amount. Like I said, church staffs are mostly full, so I would expect that we would spend that budget line this year and not have that savings or spending less than the budget amount. We should be spending the full budget amount there. And then I mentioned anything ministry wing related is all going to be part of that building fund. Is none of that is in our operating budget. So you could maybe flip to the next slide quick. Okay, then go back then. So that's the overall view of the go up to the full, one more slide back. Yeah, right here. So that's the overall view of the 2024 budget. We are budgeting a deficit. We're actually budgeting less of a deficit than we budgeted for 2023. But, we are going to spend that expenses number this year for salaries. So I'm expecting that we will have another deficit. It won't be 60, I don't think, but something less than that. And I'm comfortable with that, with the surpluses that we have built up as a congregation over the years. But I think we do need to be honest with ourselves. We cannot have a budget that's a deficit every year forever. It's not sustainable. So it's fine right now. We're a growing congregation. The giving is growing, but we are taking on a new building project that's also going to be asking everybody to provide financial support for. And so we just need to be conscious that this is a very supportable budget. And as a council, we're very much aware of that, watching as we go month to month, making sure we're doing the right things. But we just need to know as a congregation, we could not budget, obviously, a deficit and actually have a deficit, forever. A couple of years for sure. So we are going to have to be thinking about as we go, okay, what on this list would need to change if we end up with $30,000 or $40,000 of deficits per year? Our surplus was 150,000, so that's what 4 or 5 years like that, and we'd be kind of back to the break even point. So at some point, we are just going to have to talk about it as a congregation. What on this list would change if we had to cut $30,000 or $40,000, or change $30,000 or $40,000? So that's something we are fine now. We're in a good position, but we just have to be conscious of that moving forward as well. Does anyone have any other just comments about the budget, 2024 budget? I'm happy to take them now or anytime. Maybe I'll just move forward then the next slides to talk a little bit about the endowment fund. So obviously we're in a very fortunate position to have a nice endowment fund for the church. So that went up from 1.35 million up to 1.46 million, our balance this year. It was a stronger year for the markets. That's the main driver of that balance. It's not directly tied to the market. It has, all different sorts of investments in it, but it went up, which is great. We take a portion of that, comes off to us in the form of income, kind of a dividend income, which we then use to support grants. So 54,000 was the amount that came out from us. We have some carryover amounts from previous years as well. So we had $57,000 available for endowment grants, which, if you go to the next slide, which Susan can give a little bit more information on. These are the grants that were submitted, approved for discussion. So sure.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about the endowment fund and the gifts that have gone into it. This last year, we did receive a bequest from Florence Wetzel, who bequested a significant gift to the church, and I think maybe 62,000 or a little more went into the endowment fund from that, and a like amount went into our memorial funds as per our policy for undesignated gifts. And so I just want to lift up Florence, who was a longtime member of our congregation. When we would visit her, she said she prayed for our church every day, even though she wasn't able to come for the last maybe 5 or 6, 7 years of her life, and just really cared about this church and its ministry. And between Florence Wetzel and another woman who was incredibly faithful, Vivian Babcock, some of you may remember the two of those people really funded our endowment to a significant level, along with a number of other gifts that come in. So it's a wonderful witness to their faith in the church, and also to the ability of people in the congregation to make a difference for the long term as we go forward into perpetuity, really, with these resources. So I want to thank Florence and her gift and her foresight. So.
Good morning. Am I on? Oh, thank you. Good morning. I'm Susan Knowles. I'm chair of the Endowment Committee. I'd like to start this morning by asking you a question. What does the wall behind me, the chairs you're sitting in, and the Lenten meals that came out of the kitchen last year, what do all of those have in common? Yes, they were all endowment grants. The wall was part of 2021 when we were out of the church. It was the water mitigation project. The chairs, if you remember what the chairs used to look like, Jay will give you a rundown on those. These are lovely chairs that we have. That was an endowment grant. And the Lenten meals was from last year. And the nice thing about those is we have money that we can roll over because we didn't spend it all last year. So there will be more Lenten meals. So extra credit. Can you think of any other endowment grants that we funded through the years? I'm sorry? Yes, thank you. We had a wonderful dance program for a while that was funded. Yes. Thank you for remembering that. I didn't think about that one.
Some of the microphones we're using right now.
Exactly. The mics that we're using right now, the whole sound system. Okay. The 70th anniversary, we funded that. Some other things that we funded, refurbishing the organ. I think that's still in progress. Adult Bible school was funded. Okay. What all of these grants have in common is they are funded through the endowment fund, but they allow us to continue to support the mission of Midvale Community Lutheran Church. And as Pastor Blake said, we thank the people that have given to the endowment fund. The policy established with the creation of the endowment fund was and continues to be that the principle is preserved while the earnings are used for grants that fall within the areas of ministry, education, and facilities. The decision to fund these grants is made at the annual meeting. We thank the members of Midvale that have contributed to the endowment fund. As Derek pointed out, we're very fortunate. Our endowment fund grew last year, and the total that we now have available for grants is $57,127. If you have the annual report with you, if you could turn to page 57 and 58, there's a more detailed description, but I will go through these grants. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And also there are many people in here who can help to answer those questions. So, asylum seekers at Midvale Community Lutheran Wakefield House. This is a grant that comes to us from the Immigration Action Team. It is a proposal to use a church-owned house at Wakefield Street to house asylum seekers or families for 12 months. The amount requested is $10,000, and the recommendation is to fund at $10,000. There is a note here, which is that this grant is contingent on the congregation to decide whether or not they want to use Wakefield. Okay. Additional bike rack in the church parking lot. Oh, I'm sorry. If you go to, I see how they set this slide up. If you go to the second page of the grants and you look at number 9, this is an additional grant that is also pertains to the asylum seekers, and this grant would help to fund the expenses, which would include the $6,000 that Derek mentioned for utilities. And this grant, the amount requested is $9,156, and the recommendation is to fund it at $9,156. So those are the two grants there. Okay, the next one then is the bike rack, additional bike rack in the church parking lot. Many of our members do like to ride their bikes. We want to make sure that they have a nice, safe place for their bikes. The amount requested is $2,500, and the recommendation is to fund at that. To purchase an electric lawnmower. This will not replace the riding lawnmower, okay, but it will be an addition. And the amount requested is $1,000, and the recommendation is to fund at $1,000. The solar awning educational sign. This is to provide basic information about the solar awnings. And by the way, the solar awnings, a portion of the expense of putting up the solar awnings was also a grant from the endowment fund. To provide information about the awnings, their benefit, and to invite people who are looking at the sign to learn more about renewable energy and our church's commitment to renewable energy. The amount requested is $900, and the committee recommends funding at $900. extension of support for the Bakova family. We have been supporting the family through endowment grants for the last couple of years. This is a 6-month extension, and as the family has had some medical issues. The amount requested is $15,070, and the recommendation is to fund it at $15,070. Black History for a New Day. These would provide funds to support a new educational initiative at Midvale, which is a 9-week course. The course was designed by the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development out at here in Madison. It is a Black-led course designed to promote greater understanding, equity, and healing. And the amount requested is $3,000, and the recommendation is to approve the $3,000. Bedding and supply budget. This is for our quilters who produce those wonderful quilts that we have here at the church, and this is to provide some supplies for that. $1,500 is requested, and that is what we recommend, $1,500. And then the scholarship fund by the endowment fund. This is what Pastor Blake was talking about. This is part of the bequest that was received from the estate of Florence Wetzel. The bequest was undesignated, and we do have a gift acceptance policy, which says that 50%, when we have a gift like that, 50% goes to the endowment fund and 50% goes to the memorial fund. Along with the bequest was a note from Florence saying that she would like us to take $2,000 and support the scholarship that she and her husband always gave to graduating seniors. And so that is what this scholarship would do. And obviously, we would have earnings from the money that she gave us to support the $2,000. So that's the amount requested, and that's what we recommend. So are there any questions on the proposals? Yes, the question was, would the Wetzel one be an ongoing one every year? And the answer is yes, it would be. And also, there are guidelines set up for a scholarship committee, which we can share.
Yeah, so at the annual meeting, you'll see a slide. The Congregational Council also took 2 motions. One is to set up the Midvale Lutheran Scholarship Committee, which is going to be a subcommittee underneath the Endowment Committee that will have at least 3, but no more than 5 members. Will be charged with setting up the eligibility and going through the screenings for the selection of the candidate or candidates. They have the ability to expend the $2,000 and no less than. They also have the ability, with permission from the endowment and then up through the chain, to increase that if they find a point in time that they want to exceed a $2,000 per year amount. They're going to be required to report to the endowment committee, which will then be reported up to the council. So all that infrastructure is going to be there to support this new component of the gifted money.
My question is, are there any contingencies built into these numbers? I notice there are a number of grants for physical elements, and prices keep going up. For example, if the bike rack, it was 20, whatever it was, 20, whatever the price was, if it goes up $100 or $200, is that built in, or is that, would that have to be delayed and made in the process another increase might come?
Usually we have, like, Derek, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to? Okay. Well, if I misspeak, just tell me. Usually what we have is we do have money that comes back from grants because they have not spent the total. So we usually are able to cover it. For example, the microphone it was over $4,000. The grant was for $4,000, but it was like $4,000. We could cover that through monies that came back. And sometimes if we don't have the money, sometimes what we can do also is find the money in the memorial fund. So thank you. That's a good question. Anything else?
Just following up on the bike rack, if that is approved, where would that be placed? I'm just curious as I'm visualizing our small area.
The care for, yeah, maybe you can. Oh,
Thank you.
Yes, the Care for Creation Committee has been looking at that, and we'll probably have to rearrange that grassy area out there a little bit, but it will fit, and we've already looked at that. Well, next to the transformer out there.
anything else? Okay, thank you. Just a couple of just comments. We did receive another grant, and that grant was from the Worship Committee, the Sanctuary Screen Task Force. And at this time, we have not funded that grant because they're still waiting. The committee is still, the worship committee is still waiting on particulars about what type of technology they're going to use and also the exact price. So that's probably a grant that will be resubmitted. Finally, if you the Endowment Committee also looks over the funds of the Memorial Committee, and you can find that information on page 20 in the annual report, and that also grew. The fund grew from 169,275 to 228,125 this year. So again, we very much thank everyone who has given to the Endowment Committee and the Endowment Fund, excuse me, and also to the Memorial Fund. Thank you.
All right. So we have, we're going to do some quick highlights on 3 summary items. One, we're going to start with a little quick summary from Tony about the Wakefield property to explain those two grant proposals in some way, also the exciting things that are going on behind the scenes. On the ministry wing, Lori's going to give us a slide on what's coming for the capital campaign, a good preview on that. And Jean is going to quickly talk to us about the project to give you guys some numbers. So it's going to be exciting. We're going to move a little bit to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to start with Tony. I think that's on.
I think there's a slide for me. There, okay. So I'm here to represent the Immigration Action Team. We've proposed that we use the property, the Wakefield House, to house asylum seekers. And our plan would be that we would, we're hoping to house asylum seeking families because as they arrive in Dane County, families are the hardest to place in short-term housing and emergency housing. Asylum seekers also cannot receive any public benefits of any sort, unlike refugees who come with ability to get Medicaid and other benefits. And they have to wait, depending on their country of origin, it's all complicated. They have to wait at least 150 days after they apply for a work permit to be allowed to work. So they're really kind of behind the 8 ball when they get here, and that's why they desperately need help. So we're hoping to house a family, ideally for 1 year. We would join with, this is part of the exciting part, we would join with several other faith communities to do this. I'm a member of the Dane Sanctuary Coalition Advocacy and Communications Committee, and one of my colleagues on that committee is Sally Jones, who's from Beth Israel Center, congregation on a synagogue on Mount Street. And Sally looked at the Madison Area Jewish Federation has a grant funded by the estate of Cheryl Rosen Weston, and their grant requirements match this proposal absolutely perfectly. It's really good. So Sally wrote a wonderful grant submission, and our council wrote a letter of support for it. And we would partner with Beth Israel and anybody else that wants to help for not only providing, they asked for $10,000 to support our ministry on Wakefield Street. And then and any other, we would take it all volunteers and comers, and they would help us with rides and visits to food pantries and money and all that stuff. So if anybody remembers when we were hosting families here at Midvale through Road Home 4 times a year, Beth Israel was one of our buddy churches. And I really hope we get the chance to buddy with them again and move forward on this proposal. So we've already received a donation of a refrigerator from one of the synagogues in town. People are really enthused about this possibility. And the other thing that's exciting about it is we would have the support of the Dane County Immigration Affairs Office. Fabiola Hamden is a leader of that, and she wants to look at this as a pilot, which it is a pilot, for a year, so that we can model this for other congregations to join together and provide housing to these most desperate people. We commit to providing a mentor, property manager, and neighborhood liaison, since there has been a little bit of concern by some of the neighbors. And we actually have already gone a long way to identify those people to do that. And then at the end of their stay, the family would be able to get their own apartment and move on and live here. And hopefully, as a pilot, we would be able to continue this ministry going forward, looking at other ways to fund it. So what that means is this, our second endowment request of $9,156 would only be used if the other funding resources don't come through. We also have submitted a request to the Judy Faulkner Family Foundation of Epic fame. They have a foundation called Roots and Wings, and Ben Kempenen submitted an inquiry to them. We haven't heard back from that, but the Jewish Federation one is due to be announced at the beginning of March, so we'll know then whether we have that money available to us if the congregation allows us to move forward with that. Any questions? I have one editorial comment. On my recent trip to the border, it convinced me that this ministry is absolutely the right thing that we should be doing. That's my
Lori, can we go next slide, please, Emily? Not trying to be Mike.
Good morning, I'm Lori Stensland. I will do this fairly quickly because I think most of these slides many of you have seen, and many of you in this room have been involved with this project. But our history, and as I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, for me personally, it goes back even further, and for many of you, even beyond that. So I'm thinking, when I first got involved with some volunteer work in Midvale, it was because Carolyn Kane asked me to serve on the Long Range Planning Committee that she led so beautifully. And I remember one of the things we talked about, because you were instrumental, and many of you here, in the beautiful renovation of our worship center and that campaign from over 10 years ago. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could bring the rest of the building along to bring it to the same level as that space that we all love and enjoy? And that always stuck with me. So then fast forward a few years, we talked more about the possibility of another capital campaign. And in, I believe it was 2017, I was fortunate enough to be president of the council, and looking at, working with Mark Thompson then too, and thinking, boy, we've got $1 million left on that mortgage. When would we ever be able to do this? It's going to be a long way off in the future. And look what happened in 2023, paid it off 7 years early. So I am very excited, very optimistic, and just enthusiastic about the year ahead and this campaign that we are about to launch. So again, many of you have seen this, but going back to this one starts at 2016, we did go through the effort of getting congregational feedback. What is important as we look to the future of Midvale? What would you like to see? 2019 evaluated the ministry wing with the architect and contractor. We did more interviews with staff, with volunteers, various user groups, reviewed design, and we were just getting ready to go to the council in 2020, and we all know what happened. So great big old pandemic pause, and then a couple of years, well, how long? A year or so ago? Try to remember the timeline, even though it's right in front of me here. We brought the conversation back. And myself and Jean Nelson, and again, several of you in this room have been involved in this conversation of making this finally come to life after a pause. So we did things in the meantime, things that I won't spend time on, but was mentioned, for instance, the water mitigation strategy that was done in 2021, all kind of moving us forward to the point where we are today. So committee has been reconvened. You can go to the next slide. I think there was another slide, but that's okay. You know what there we go. Just real quick, this is another slide that has been presented before, but these were the big 5 needs that were identified through a long series of all this work. Existing building maintenance, maximizing our space. We have a lot of space that hadn't been used very well because of issues like the dank basement that have now been fixed, but there's a lot more we can do to better utilize this building. Comfort areas, including things like gender neutral bathrooms, sustainable design improvements, and general building aesthetics. So those were the 5 that really came to the forefront. Now you can go to the next slide, please. And I'm rushing through this really quickly, but to where we are today, actually literally today, we are working with GSB Fundraising. Peter Royce is here this morning. We've got a morning of afternoons with various volunteer teams that have been recruited or in the process of being recruited. So thank you to those of you in this room that have perhaps stepped up to serve on one of these, or perhaps you will be asked or would like to volunteer. We would love to have you involved. So the steering team, Mark Thompson and I are fortunate enough to be co-chairs of the campaign, both very excited about this. We have an inspiration team, a hospitality team, communications and response. You will hear more about what that means, what all these various groups are doing in their near future. We are currently in what fundraisers like to call the quiet phase of a campaign. Much work is happening, but you will start to hear much, much more when we move into the active phase in early April. And we're looking at roughly a 6-week campaign with our results announced in late May. So much, much more to come, but I just wanted to give you that quick update on where we are. Questions? Or Mark, do you want to say anything?
I'll just chime in. Thank you for the presentation. If you're like me, you come into something like this with a certain skepticism that we're going to have, professional fundraisers guiding us. And I've been through it that way, and we've done it other ways. And some of you that have been here a long time have probably seen both ways done. But I'm quite convinced that it's a wise opportunity, because what we will be doing in addition, before we ask for anyone to make a commitment financially, is for people to, get a little closer to the Bible and look a little bit more at what we're doing here and why we want to enhance this building so that we can do more. And once you do that, you have a little more perspective on, well, gee, what can I do and what do I want to do and how do I want to respond to what I'm being asked? And so I think that all is done with a spiritual, push. I mean, it's kind of like the housing for the immigration. I didn't know much about that until about 5 years ago, and I've been learning from Tony and others. And And now I went with that border group, and I agree 100% with what she said as an editorial on the Wakefield House. It's that kind of thing, I think, that can help us all get behind something like this.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, Jean, let's go ahead with the solar awning. Thank you. Nope, one more.
Thank you. I'm Gene Nelson. I was a member of the Care for Creation Committee along with Karen Richardson over there. And we started a campaign in early 2022 to raise funds to install a solar awning project. And well, we signed contracts, and well, it took longer than we thought. We finally flipped the switch on January 24th, 1923. So I was able to track the utility bills over the last year to see where we actually did. So the first column where it says estimated average year, those are the estimates that we got from the contractor on how much energy we would save, how much dollars we'd save, and our carbon reduction footprint. And so the right column is what actually happened. So we produced an actual total of 9542 kilowatt hours, which is about 95% of what the estimate was. So maybe not quite as sunny years we thought it would have. But 9212 kilowatt hours actually went to reduce the electric bill directly. At times, the building's not using energy, but we're still producing energy. So we sold back to MG&E 330 kilowatt hours. So we don't quite get as much money back from the reduction. We get more, about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, but we get about 9 cents back from MG&E when we sell it back to them. And so the total savings for last year was I estimated about $1,032, which is 11% above what the 2021 rates was. So we're on track. So hopefully we have a sunny year, and every time it's sunny, thank God. Thank you.
And thank all of you, because you funded these awnings that are producing the savings. So I appreciate that. So we will see you. I appreciate your time. Yep, go ahead. Question. Let me see if this is on. Now you'll go.
I would just like to ask Derek if before the annual meeting, he would put together a little bit of a slide about the percentage of our money that we spend on charitable and giving, and the percentage of money that we spend to operate our building itself. Because I think it's pretty high, and I think we need to know when we give our money how much and how strong our giving is social and other kinds of responsibilities. So if you could do something like that, I think that would be helpful at the meeting.
So if anyone heard, we'll work on that to the extent. There's also a report within the annual report from the social ministry, which goes and details a lot of what they're doing. But we'll get that conversation. Anything further that we can help you with? All right. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. And I, again, I hope you are all able to join us next week so we can get some exciting new people elected and move forward with our budget with some excitement for 2024. Thank you very much for your time. I did your opening prayer.
Excellent, thank you.
I just was a little worried. I was a little worried about time.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it was very, very well.